Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Riccardo Bosi, National Leader of Australia One, and welcome to an Australian One update. I'm also the independent candidate for the seat of Greenway in New South Wales. This is authorised by Riccardo Bosi, 122 Perfection Avenue, Stanhope Gardens, New South Wales. Welcome, everybody. Sarah, I understand you've got some questions that need answering, so let's get straight to it.
Yes, we do. I've been hearing there's lots of dramas on the hustings, so can you just fill us in with regards to that, please?
Oh, yeah, it's you thought politics is a dirty game. It's a dirty game, all right. Now, what do we, oh, there we go. So what do we got? Three things have popped up recently. We've had to communicate with the Australian Electoral Commission to formally advise them of some, I don't know, let's just call them unpleasant activities by both AEC staff and the Labor supporters. They're a special breed, aren't they? The Labor supporters, the Labor volunteers. Not all of them, mind you. Some of them are nice, quite nice. But at the Blacktown Leisure Centre, there's a polling booth there at Stanhope Gardens, and the AEC staff actually told them that when they requested pens to mark their ballot, they said, no, you must use a pencil because of COVID. And they sent them on their way. This is the AEC staff. Now, pencils are provided because apparently that's much better for everybody, says the AEC, if you check their handbook. But we checked, and of course you can use a pen. In fact, you can use a pen of any color. But, you know, it would be, is it possible that they're using pencils so it's easier to change the ballots after the fact? And I've heard reports, reliable reports, that they do that. They'll erase with one finger and they'll put in another number with another finger. But, you know, that would be Tom Rogers, head of the AEC. That wouldn't be right, would it, mate? You had one bloody job to do. It doesn't look like you're doing a very good job of it. But anyway, that happened at the Blacktown Leisure Centre. At the Blacktown TAFE, another pre-poll location in the seat of Greenway, an AEC staff member was assisting an elderly gentleman into the how to vote, into the booth, which is lovely. That's nice to see. But this individual this AEC staff member saw the gentleman was holding one of my how to votes, Riccardo Bosi for Greenway. And she was seen to take it from him and say, you don't need that. You don't need to vote for him. He's an independent. So how about that? So here we have prima facie evidence of AEC staff committing electoral fraud. Now, Tom Rogers, head of the AEC, how interested are you in this? My guess is not very much, because this has been happening for a long time, and you've been the acting and now full-time head of the AEC for what, 5-6 years now? You had one bloody job to do, Tom, and you're not doing a very good job. And it continues. And it goes on. At the Riverstone pre-polling station, there's a particularly loathsome ALP volunteer that harasses my volunteers who have been told just to, you know, that this is not a time for discussions and political debates. This is a time just to hand the how to votes out, explain to the electors who we are, what we stand for, and who we recommend. Nothing wrong with that. Well, this particularly loathsome little ALP supporter and his mate have been harassing my staff, and my staff have been saying, look, if you want to, you can put one above the line, vote one above the line or 6 below. And they came up and said, no, you've got to do 6. Well, that's actually not true, because we've checked it several times with the good people down at the Divisional Returning Officer's office, and that is actually quite false. It is a lawful vote, and you'll be listening to a lot of YouTube loudmouths as well. Ladies and gentlemen, we've checked. I'm the candidate. I've checked. My staff have checked. One above the line in the Senate or 6 below the line for the Senate is a formal vote and will be counted. And if anybody tells you otherwise, knowingly or not, what they are doing is actually forcing you to preference Liberal or Labor, because as the preferences trickle down, it'll go into one or the other. Now, Liberal or Labor are terrified of one vote above the line, because that vote exhausts if your man or woman doesn't get in, and that's a good thing. And Liberal or Labor are trying to steal the Senate from you, the electors. So, ladies and gentlemen, unequivocal, one above the line or 6 below is utterly legal. It is utterly formal. It will be counted, notwithstanding what Tom Rogers' incompetent or corrupt AEC staff are saying. Now, to make things worse, this Labor volunteer that was harassing my volunteers went in and complained to the OIC of the Riverstone pre-polling booth. And this gentleman, who I'm not saying he is, you know, a big man, but Christ, he makes his rock look slim. He wandered out and told my volunteer to stop giving that advice to people, or he'd call the cops. That's lovely, isn't it? That's called interference in the political process. I think that's a 3-year prison sentence, in fact, if found out to be true. And so I contacted the divisional returning officer once again, who recommended that we put a formal complaint into the fraud investigation department, which we've now done. And this gentleman has been reported formally, because this is not the old days of Labor. It's a whole new game in town. And your corrupt practices are about to come to a crashing halt. So the OIC of the officer in charge of the Riverstone booth threatened to call the cops if my volunteer didn't stop telling people you could vote one along the line. Well, my hardworking chief of staff and bride, Rhiannon, went down and politely showed evidence to this OIC from the scrutiny's handbook, pages 38 and 40, that 1 above the line and 6 below the line for the Senate is a formal vote. And he said, quote, well, unless I get in writing, I'm not going to do it. So Tom Rogers, here we go again, mate. You can't even select people to know their job, or you can't do your job. One of the two, mate. Which is it? Are you Masonic filth and you following corrupt orders, or are you just an imbecile and incompetent, mate? Because there's only 1 or 2 choices. You're one or the other, Tom, because you had one job to do, run an election every 3 years. How tough would that be, mate? You still can't clean up the electoral roll. You still can't brief your staff correctly, and you still can't vet them to make sure they're not Labor stooges. Tom Rogers, mate, your name's going to be up there. We're going to investigate the AEC and everybody that's part of it. Oh, and just so you understand, we've got everything. Every email, every tweet, it's all there. So good luck, Tom, on that. We hope that you're a good, honest man, but just in case, we'll be investigating you. So this is what's been going on in the hustings. The Liberal Labor Masonic filth are trying to squeeze the electors into forcing preferences in the Senate. Don't do it, ladies and gentlemen, just don't do it. 1 above the line or 6 below is a valid vote for the Senate, and it prevents the Liberal Labor Masonic filth from forcing you to preference them. And that's the reason, in my opinion, why they're doing it. So that's the election update, Sarah. It's been a lot of fun, as you can imagine. Not only are we fighting the Liberal Labor National Greens cabal, but we're fighting the referee as well, because I think, in my opinion, the referee, that is not the entire AEC, because there's a lot of very good people in the AEC, and we've worked with them. The divisional returning officer of the seat of Greenway, excellent people, very, very good people. But I tell you what, there's some scum that have slipped in. So Tom, it's on you, mate. That's what CEO stands for, Chief Everything Officer. And if there's problems, it's on your neck, mate.
Thanks very much for that, Riccardo. Unfortunately, this isn't an isolated incident to the electorate of Greenway. We've had very similar reports across Queensland and Victoria as well. So it's not just because Riccardo Bosi is in Greenway, it's across the board, unfortunately.
There you go, folks. I've got to tell you, you should be incandescent with rage. This is the second most important thing you can do after raising a good family, and that is selecting the individuals who will represent you in your parliament, and they are trying to steal it from you. As I've said before, this is old news, but I'll do it again for those who might be new to the game. Frauding of votes, Dr. Amy McGrath. Frauding elections, Dr. Amy McGrath. We haven't had an honest election in this country for decades, and I mean decades and decades and decades. The one that they think they really flipped enough seats to flip the election was Bob Hawke's election. Never should have happened, but they did it. Labor Party boasted. But don't think the Liberal Party get off scot-free, because the Liberal Party don't care. When I ran in Eden Monaro, the Liberal scrutineers were complaining that a lot of the AEC staff counting the votes were actually Labor. And what they were doing is they'd get maybe, groups of 50 or 100 votes and then stick a Labor one on top and say there's 100 for Labor. It was actually Liberal. When they complained to Liberal headquarters, the Liberal headquarters said, oh, don't worry about it. It's almost like they're two wings of the same bird. But hey, time will tell. Ladies and gentlemen, you should be incandescent with rage. And at the end of this, win, lose or draw, we're going to be making some serious inquiries into the AEC, starting with Mr. Tom Rogers at the top, the man who couldn't organise a piss up in a brewery, in my opinion, all the way down to who are the people and what training do they receive to do this one job every 3 years, Tom. So we'll have a good look. So, mate, good luck with that. Next question, please, Sarah.
Thank you. Okay, I received an article from a supporter. Just let me read it out, the heading. High-tech Chinese warship is spying on Australia and lurking off the western coast in an unprecedented act of aggression, says Peter Dutton. Very concerning. Now, this supporter would like to know,
Yeah.
what is A1's policy when it comes to Chinese warships?
Oh, I can tell you straight away. You know what it is. It's to be militarily intimidating. What that means in practice is they don't dare. Now you got to understand a few things. If a warship drifts into Australian territorial waters uninvited, that's an act of war. And you warn them, and if they don't back off, you blow them out of the water. That's what militarily intimidating means. But China knows they own Australia. Now I don't know whether this warship was in international waters or territorial waters, but you know, for Mr. Potato Head, and if anybody wants evidence of alien involvement in the evolution of mankind, he's right there in the form of Peter Dutton, vegetable and human mixed together. Mr. Potato Head, the defence minister, he and his party have been complicit, in my opinion, in the selling out of Australia to China for decades, and right alongside with Labor. So for Dutton to pretend he's all hot and bothered about a Chinese spy ship, you know, grow up, Peter. Explain to the people that these spy operations happen all the time. That's what submarines are for. That's what spy ships are for. But if you had half the balls that you think you have, or you want people to believe you have, mate, you'd have said something before this. But to pretend that all of a sudden you're concerned about Chinese interference in Australia, please. You've sold the place out 100 times over, you and your party have. And now you're pretending for the sake of the show, trying to persuade people you're the hard man of defense. Well, there's nothing hard about you, mate. We know that. You're a muppet. You're a marshmallow. You're nothing. You're nothing, mate. We know that. So don't worry about what Dutton says, because what Dutton says is largely immaterial. What's important is the fact that is China entering Australian territorial waters without warships entering Australian territorial waters without permission, which is an act of war, which happened in Sydney Harbour and nobody said anything about it. Or are they just spying? And if they're spying, well, guess what? They're in international waters. That goes on all the time, folks. This is the real world. But I tell you what, if we had a defence force that was actually capable, but under, of course, Angus Campbell, all they can do is poodle fake, and that's a military term. All they can do is poodle fake and look good wearing ribbons they didn't earn. So there you go. So don't worry about it. What it means for A1's policy is that we will have such a defence force that people won't want to come close, because it's not, and we'll do it legally. I'm not talking about doing anything illegally under international law, but the ways of making sure that our adversaries keep well away from our backyard. So that's our policy.
Thanks, Riccardo. Okay, last question. Now, people ask me this all the time, and we get into little debates. The 2% tax, expenditure tax. So most people don't think it's viable. They think there's no way you can run a country on a 2% expenditure tax. So I know you've got figures there. Can you please explain to everyone how it will work?
Absolutely correct. Now, yeah, I get this a lot too. I'm glad you asked it, because the numbers make all the difference. And we haven't released the numbers yet because we wanted people to get a bit interested, and they are. How the hell can you run a country? Because right now, people have heard me say, you're paying 30 to 40% income tax, and then on top of that, you got all the indirect taxes, totaling, depending on your spending profile, between 60 to 70% of your income. It goes on taxes. So how the hell can you run a country on 2% when we're already paying 60 to 70% and we're in deficit every year? You know, that imbecile Josh Frydenberg that couldn't run a corner store tells us it's going to take us till 2080 to clear our debt. Well, Josh, if you'd paid attention in grade 3 and learnt your maths, you could do it yourself. But these figures come from the RBA, the Reserve Bank of Australia. So this is their figures. You got it? Now, one qualifying statement before we kick off, or so you understand, to give you context. Right now, the tax burden is carried by the PAYE earners, the PAYG, pay as you go. Every fortnight you're out there breaking your back, working hard, and you get your paycheck, and my God, you might be making $1,500, but you get 1,000, or if you're making 1,000, you get 600. It all evaporates in tax. And then you've got to take that, you're starting behind the 8 ball just from the get-go. Now, companies, corporations, trusts, they don't pay tax. Now, the reason for that is this: their pre-tax profit is spent on things that they want, and so they get to a point where they actually haven't made any profit, so no tax. Pretty straightforward. There are other ways of minimizing tax, and in some cases avoiding, but that's basically it. So the burden of taxation is on the poor schlebs out there, the poor workers who are paying their tax every fortnight, and they just haven't got enough to get by. Now, this is by design. Now, that's point number one. It's all on the tax, it's all on the workers, it's not on the corporations. Point number two, where does the money go? It goes everywhere but into consolidated revenue, where it should go to: infrastructure, schools, hospitals, roads, ports, bridges, airfields, all the things that we need, that heavy infrastructure, dams. in order to produce a productive nation. But it doesn't go there. It goes straight overseas to special interests. Which ones do you ask? Well, we've got from one hand $100 million to the Hamas terrorist organization in the Middle East. Why are we giving them $100 million a year, Julie Bishop? Because that's what you did when you were in power. Let's go to the other end. We've got old mate Malcolm Turnbull that gave $444 billion to an obscure Barrier Reef Research Foundation with 7 people on it. There are more members of the board of directors than there were members of the actual organization. They didn't ask for the money. They didn't know what to do with the money, and they got the money. But apparently some of the board members were well connected. Let's just leave that there. And then you've got, again, Julie Bishop and Julia Gillard, 2 wings of the same bird, Liberal Labor. They each gave in the vicinity of $250 million to the Clinton Foundation. Now, why would a sovereign nation give money to a charity, an alleged charity that gives something like 3% of its total incomings to charitable work, and the rest goes on salaries, meetings, flights, Chelsea's wedding, things like that? So there's 2 parts. The average wage earner is carrying the burden of tax, and the money's being spent like a drunken sailor. So how can we do this on 2%? Well, let me give you the numbers. And once again, this is part of the RBA. So what do we got? We have, oh, well, let me just get the lights here because these numbers are small, but the impact is big. So just bear with me for a moment, please, folks. Smoke them while if you've got them. Take your time, sing a song. Be right with you. Okay, now stick with me here. Write these numbers down and work it out for yourself. Commonwealth and state spending expenditure in 2018, $735 billion. $735 billion outgoing. Commonwealth and state. Revenues, Commonwealth and state for the same year, Commonwealth and state, $511 billion. So there's a deficit of $220 billion a year. We're spending $220 billion more than we take in. That's in 2018, just to give you rough numbers. Now, our 2% expenditure tax, so this is tax on what has been spent. So you spend money, you pay 2% on. So for every dollar you spend, you pay 2 cents, and that's it. Nothing more, nothing more. Now here's how we calculate it. The total value of electronic, that means non-cash payments, in 2019 was $255 billion each business day. So each day, $255 billion changed hands for one reason or another. And this is the source is the RBA. There are 251 working days in 2019. So to calculate what 2% expenditure tax will earn for the Commonwealth, for the nation, you've got the $255 billion that changes hands each day. You've got 251 working days, and you multiply that by 2%, and you will earn just under $1.3 trillion. 1.3 trillion. Now go back to the first figure I gave you. Our expenditure was 735 billion. We're now going to earn 1.3 trillion. That gives us $500 billion, $500 billion surplus every year. Now, where does that money come from? Well, as I said at the beginning, at the moment, taxes are borne by the workers. This means everybody, every corporation, everybody just gets to pay 2 cents in the dollar when they spend money. Now, what does that mean in practical terms? You buy a house, you're going to pay a 2% expenditure tax. When that house increases its value, let's say you buy a house for 500,000 and you're lucky enough, and man, it goes for $1 million. Guess how much tax you pay on that? Nothing. It's yours. You don't pay a cent. The money's yours, folks. You have been robbed blind for decades. Now, I know people will find this hard to believe. You have been robbed blind for decades. And let me tell you the list of taxes that this 2% expenditure tax will remove forever. Personal income tax, capital gains tax, corporate taxes, trustee liability taxes, goods and services taxes, property taxes, stamp duties, luxury car taxes, payroll taxes, fringe benefits taxes, and superannuation taxes. All gone. It's your money. Keep it. Invest it. Make money. Congratulations. It's yours. Well done. We are encouraging people to save. But the thing is, when you want to spend, you just pay 2 cents in the dollar. That's it. And that's how we make just under $1.3 trillion, which gives us a $500 billion surplus every year, and just with the current rate of expenditure. And that's how it works. I know you'll have difficulty understanding. People will dismiss this. I don't care. Do the maths, go to the RBA, get the data, work it out for yourself. You have been robbed blind for years, and the money that you've been putting into taxes has gone straight overseas to special interests. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time you stood up. Spend as much time investigating your candidates and their plans as you do when you buy your mobile phone, for goodness sake, please. And understand this. These policies, 2 years work, there's a lot of fun in there, but can you imagine that? On average, what will happen when this 2% expenditure tax comes in and all the rest goes, it's good for business, it's good for individuals. Everybody is ahead. Everybody's ahead. Even the corporations, they are ahead. But effectively, what it means for the average worker is you'll come home with your pay packet and you'll effectively get somewhere between a 2.5 to 3.5%. Your pay will increase by 2.5 or 3.5 times. So if your in pocket was, I don't know, pick a number, $500, you'll come home with $1,500, and it's yours to keep, yours to spend, yours to invest. And if you invest and you make money, that's none of the government's business. Make as much money as you can, folks. Do the numbers, check it out, but that's how the 2% expenditure tax works in outline. It removes all the indirect taxes, as many of the indirect taxes as we can, and we're going to make all the money we need. And you, the people, will be able to get married, buy a house, raise a family, educate them, have holidays, leave a little bit as a nest egg for them when you pass. And one of you will be able to stay home because you'll only need one of you to save enough money to buy a house. How cool is that? And families should have somebody home, whether it's mum or dad, none of our business. Once again, that's up to you. Mum wants to stay home and raise the kids, great. If dad wants to do it, fantastic. You both want to do it, none of our business. But the fact is you should earn your money, keep your money, and be as happy, healthy, and wealthy as you can be. And that's the metric we use. If it's good for kids and it's good for the family, then it's got to be good for the country. And that's the 2% expenditure tax in short form. And there's a whole lot more good stuff behind that too. We're not going to release all of it yet because we know that there's more to come. But this should get your attention to realize what the purpose of this election is, to show you folks how badly you've been stitched up, and there's a better way to do business. So that's it, Sarah. That's it from me. Have you got anything else there that needs to be added?
Well, if I was in the electorate of Greenway, you'd definitely have my vote. No, but I just want to say to everyone, please really do your research into your candidates. And just because they're an independent candidate doesn't mean they're a genuine independent candidate. It is so important, you as an elector, it is so important that we put a lot of thought into this, because it really makes a huge difference in the end. If we all come together collectively, we can really make a big change. So thank you so much, Riccardo.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks, Sarah. And this is authorised by Riccardo Bosi, independent candidate for Greenway, 122 Perfection Avenue, Stanhope Gardens. Get in tomorrow, vote, be patient, be happy. And for goodness sake, ladies and gentlemen, make a choice that's in your interest and your children's interest and your family's interest. And if it's good for the family, it's good for the country. Thank you very much. Thanks very much, Sarah. We'll see you again soon.